community is the core of every single thing that we do. And it has to be the core because that's what gives it, I guess, its power on a global scale. You can't be something for everyone. And I think the moment that sort of I realized that was the moment that I felt like, you know what, I actually am unstoppable and I'm going to keep on pushing. Because if it was something that was for absolutely everyone, it would fail. And it would fail for multiple reasons.
Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. It took us a bit of time to get here.
It did. But we've known each other for, what's it been, like 5 years, 6 years, something like that?
I think we quickly forget the COVID years, but it's probably been even longer than that. I think it's closer to 7, 8 years.
Cheaper. Yeah, I remember I met you. It was funny because I met you when I joined this motorcycle ride that someone had told me was a cool thing. Because there's people out there at the moment going, Mark Hawwa, how do I know that name? You may not know who he is, but for anyone that's involved in two wheels, you will know DGR, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. And a buddy of mine turned around and said, hey, do you want to do this DGR thing? And I was like, what? Are we all getting together? We all wear old kind of gentlemanly outfits, waistcoats, bow ties, and we ride through the streets of LA. And I met the crowd, and I think it was at Pasadena, and me and you met there, briefly chatted, and then I found out that you were the man that founded that. So let's give it some perspective. The DGR is run on the same day at every major city in the planet.
Yeah, it's huge. And I actually, come to think about it, it was when I first met you, was 2015. So that's 8 years ago.
Wow. So, all right, so let's break down. We're going to go into the DGR. If that hasn't got anyone interested enough of how to do something that's global and in every city, then, I don't know what will grab them. Let's take it right back to the root. Now, you're a motorhead. You like four wheels, you like two wheels, but you founded DGR to bring awareness to prostate cancer.
Yeah,
why and how did it start?
Initially, actually, I founded DGR just to get dressed up, have a laugh, and break a stereotype. That was actually the first DGR. So there was a picture of Don Draper from Mad Men, which is played by John Hamm. It was a GQ, either a cover or an image that existed in GQ magazine, and he was in a suit on an old matchless motorcycle. And through my experience of riding motorcycles, there was always this slightly sort of negative connotation to it. Relating to one percenters, relating to being, the bad boys of the streets, right? Whereas for me, it was how do we break that stereotype, and then it was how do we break that stereotype globally. So initially, the idea came: let's dress up in suits and let's ride through the heart of each city, and let's use that as an example to show people that hey, it's open face helmets. People are smiling. You don't need to fear what's behind that helmet. And that first year, we actually had 64 mates of mine get in contact through social media and through some of the stuff that I'd done in the automotive industry earlier and say, we're in. And so we quickly had to put some guidelines together. I wanted to make sure that it was consistent globally, even from year one. But year one really was, let's break this stereotype. And you could feel that stereotype breaking because in Sydney, there was a lot of stuff that was happening at that time with 1% motorcycle gangs. There was a lot of coverage on the news about it. And we were all being painted with that same brush. Whereas, to be fair, we're on classic bikes, but to the general public, that's irrelevant. A motorcycle is a motorcycle. They don't understand the different sort of niches that exist within motorcycling. But we rode through the heart of George Street in Sydney, and you could ultimately hear the roar of 300 motorcycles around you, which was incredible. But you could also sort of feel this fear that people on the sidewalk were experiencing. But by the time they turn around, they see these guys in suits and these ladies in dresses, and they're getting a royal wave and they're getting a talio, and they're stopping to let you cross the road. It was just such a cool way to sort of change the public perception of those people that got to see what was happening live.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast. I know it's a brilliant one, but I wanted to talk to you about your room, your connections. Now, we know full well that great things come from great connections and great rooms. Now, if you're in a room full of people that will challenge you, inspire you, motivate you, and support you, then great. But if not, then maybe I have the solution for you. Head on over to stevedsims.com, look up Sims Distillery there, and join our community of creative disruptors, those that are only not there to help you and motivate and actually give you information, but to support and answer questions. We very much vet the room to make sure that we support each other's growth. We all want each other to grow. So if you want to be in the right room, head on over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, and I'll see you inside my room. Enjoy the rest of the show. So you did it to break the connotations and the one percenters and the myths and mayhem of being a biker.
Yep.
And it sounds big to turn around, and certainly not dissing it. It sounds big to go, 300 engines rolling through Sydney. That's minute compared to the sound of every city in the planet on the same day. Yeah. You now have thousands. I remember when I did the first one in LA, I think we were about 800 or 900 bikes. We had a police escort so that we were never stopped at a red light, and we were cruising down Hollywood Boulevard. And this year we were cruising down, Rodeo Drive. So you've gone from 300 bikes riding through your hometown to thousands of bikes riding through the planet. When did it actually get this foothold of other cities going, hey, we want to do what Mark did in Sydney?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because the idea was enough to motivate a substantial amount of people that I personally knew. But within the next year, when you've got content that's showcasing a different side to cycling that, we connect with more than we connect with, that hardcore bullshit, it happened really quickly. So we went from 64 cities in the first year to 145 cities in the second year. And it was after that first year that we looked at the event, and we had some contacts that were working in the prostate cancer awareness space. And the idea was, okay, well, we're breaking this stereotype globally of what it is to be a motorcyclist. How do we break this macho mentality that also is perceived and does exist in motorcycling? And the right way for us to do that was to focus on a cancer back then that was taboo. Guys didn't want to talk about prostate cancer. Guys were still thinking that prostate cancer was a finger up the backside. And that was enough to stop men from getting checked for prostate cancer. So when we started working on it, finding out that it was a PSA test, it was essentially a blood test to begin with. And if the blood test is all good, then you're all good. We started focusing on that as a cause. And in that first year, which would have been 2013, we set a goal of $250,000 to raise for prostate cancer research and awareness. And friends and family are like, you're crazy. You're never going to get anywhere near that amount. And I remember being at the end of the ride in Sydney, and we're having lunch, and I just hear a huge round of applause. And I'm like, oh, what's that for? And someone came up to me and said, they had the website on their phone, and they said, we just hit $250,000. I'm like, that would be fucking right. That's amazing. And it just continued to snowball from there. I mean, obviously there's a lot of work that goes into it, but if we were to fast track to this year we had 900 rides, 105 countries, 107,000 riders. And in a year which we thought would be a bit of a quieter year in fundraising, obviously there's inflation in a lot of Western markets at the moment. The most we've ever raised is $6.1 million US. This year we raised $7.4 million US. That's a 20% increase, when we were telling all of our sponsors and partners in the event that, hey, anything over $5 million US is amazing, and we get to 7.4. So it's got this life of its own where people aspire to take part in the event. And I mean, even those that I know personally that are like, I'm not going to wear a suit. I don't want to look like that while riding a motorcycle. They take part in it. They're like, actually, Mark, yeah, that was a lot of fun, man.
It is. So I've done it for, I think, 3 years, and I'd always said to my wife, oh, you want to come along? And I've got a range of motorcycles. So, if I'm on the Ducatis, if I'm on the British, if I'm on the Harleys, they've all got that kind of stereotype as, the girl that's on the back. And Claire's never really wanted to be part of this until one year she was like, yeah, okay. She ended up getting a bow tie, and thankfully, she followed the guidelines that I gave her. But to say that she didn't want to is probably an understatement. But she did turn up with the braces, the slacks, the bow tie. absolutely loved it that I think a month later she was picking out her outfit for 2024. So
That's incredible.
the people that are around it really get into it, and probably the closest I could compare it to was the euphoria of how people go to Goodwood Revival in England, where they go, hey, we're going to an event. Ha, that's one thing, but we want to be part of it and we want to experience it. So we need to be it. And that's what you've created. When was the first thing? When was the first time that you went, hang on, I've created something that's bigger than me?
I think it was pretty early. I mean, I'm a pretty intrinsic guy, and I mean, even when it comes to sort of receiving credit for DGR, it's for me, it's always how do you give the credit to all the people that take part in it? Because when you look at DGR as an event, when you've got 107,000 riders and you've got over 900 sort of rides taking place around the world, it's a lot of set of helping hands that make that happen. And we've got a small team of, it fluctuates between 5 and 6 people in the office. And that's managing all of that. And then on top of that, you've also got the Distinguished Gentleman's Drive, which is more like your Goodwood revival, especially because it's based around sort of classic cars. So I think there's not a day that goes by that we know that we've created something that's bigger than us. We also are aware that, we're not that important anymore, which is a really weird thing to say, but this has got a life of its own. And sometimes you're dealing with 900 different people, you're dealing with 900 different personalities, right? Unfortunately, some of those personalities are going to be slightly more narcissistic than others. The majority of them are amazing, but they feel like if they were for some reason to not host a ride, that it wouldn't happen. Whereas it's actually quite the opposite. If someone decides not to host a ride, there'll be 10 people there that do want to host a ride. And the same goes for us. We could sit there tomorrow and say, yep, I'm the founder, I've created this, I can stop this. But I guarantee that if I turn around tomorrow and say DGR is cancelled, there will still be 900 people that will run their own ride. It won't be as uniform. They'll probably be sort of supporting different charities. But for us, the goal is how do we use this as a positive means to actually have better outcome for men globally? And that's what we achieve. And so for us, it's we need to do that together. We need to be able to have all these people on side, and we need to be able to make sure that we're focusing on the right projects through November.
Now, I want to make sure no one misses out on this, and I don't want to wait until the end. If anyone is out there thinking this sounds like some cool thing to do on a Sunday, for a start, it freaking well is. What is the best place for them to find out more information or to just keep track on the next rides that are coming up in their area?
Yeah, just Google Gentleman's Ride, or even just jump on gentlemansride.com. You can sort of pre-register. It's the third week of May, which I believe is the 19th for next year. And it's always consistently that third week of May. So it's a really easy one to be able to put into your diary for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years or however long it lasts. And the beautiful thing about it is, I mean, in your part of the world, it's pretty comfortable weather. In our part of the world, it's comfortable weather. It's that sort of date where it sort of works for everyone. And the benefit of that is, we probably only get about 5 to 10 postponed rides a year because it sort of falls in this period where there's actually not that much rain. So it's a pretty fortunate date for us.
Cool. Now, you've got some great sponsorship. Let's give a little plug to the people that have got behind this and actually backed it. So who are your who are your sponsors?
I would definitely say Triumph. I mean, that's been a decade-long relationship. So they partnered up with us in 2014 or 2014, I think it was. And it was initially a 3-year deal, and then it was a 3-year deal, and then we were negotiating, I think it was last year, and we were working on the terms and conditions, and basically we put a dollar amount to it. They said no. They came back to us. We said, no, it's going to be the dollar amount that we stipulated, and it's a 3-year contract. They came back to us and said, yep, we agree on the dollar amount, but we can't agree on the term of the contract. And I was thinking, oh, here we go. If they turn around and say year by year, that doesn't show a lot of faith in the relationship that we've had. And they turned around, they said it's 5 years or nothing. So we've still got a substantial amount of time, to which I turned around and said we should have charged you more, and we all had a big laugh. But they've been a fantastic sponsor. And I think for us, the beauty about that relationship is it's not purely commercial. We've
Right.
been working with these guys for so long, and when they leave that organization, we get the phone call in tears going, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride was the best thing that we've worked on while working here. What it's done for the local community is amazing. And a lot of the people that we've worked with at Triumph, they've had fathers that have gone through prostate cancer or are currently going through prostate cancer.
Mm.
So it's more meaningful. And the beautiful thing about the relationship with Triumph is as they grow, we also grow as well. So they're in a lot more countries now than they were initially when we started working with them. So we've now got more rides in countries that we didn't have rides before at all. So it's been a really mutually beneficial sort of, I guess, relationship. And what they've been able to help us achieve is more eyeballs. And to be fair, some kick-ass motorcycles that people get to win as prizes. Like the 3 highest fundraisers get a motorcycle. If you can pick another sort of event globally that awards, motorcycles to people that do an amazing job of bringing awareness and fundraising, then I'd love to hear what it is.
Let's pick on that for a second. You've already said you have a small dedicated team, but your technology is killer. You see, the
Yep.
beautiful thing is this is a charity now. Now, I ride on this event. I post myself onto the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride website. And so people can search for me when I'm riding in my group. And you can donate to me riding that event. And the donations go to the Prostate Cancer Foundation. And it's tax deductible. But the way you actually do that is very, very seamless. Now, of course, I don't make any money out of it. It all goes to charity. But the technology behind it is very good. When did you realize you needed to make that technology so seamless? Because it really is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a fantastic website, and it's great that we've got people in the office here that can do coding on that website. But the platform itself is actually called fundraising, and that platform was developed quite funnily as a platform for lots of different charities to use. But the people that created that platform were the guys that did our first ever website. And then when we started adjusting what sort of features we needed and being able to work on it, which we can exclusively do, not many other people are allowed to do that, it grew into something much bigger than it was. And to be fair, I actually wish I was somehow invested in that platform as part owner, because that would have been amazing. But it is a platform. But what we're able to do is sit there and look at this platform and go, okay, well, how do we make the adjustments that we need to work better for our audience? And that's continually evolving. I mean, initially it was a lot more time intensive, and that's why, this was the focus full time for all the staff. Whereas now we're able to split it out between the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, the Distinguished Gentleman's Drive, and I can work on the other projects that I've got as well. But for us, the key part is, how do you keep consistency on a global level? Because essentially, DJR in its own right is a brand as well, and it's a brand that people connect with. And we know that people connect with it because there's probably 30 people out there with tattoos that have them. And I remember I was in Japan once and I saw a guy reach into a backpack on the street, and he had tattoos, and I was admiring them because in Japan, tattoos are taboo. You don't tend to see it often. And as he's pulling out something from his bag, he had a DGR tattoo on his right arm. And I went up to him and I said, "Oh, hey man, what's that tattoo? It's really cool." And I was just playing dumb, right? I wanted to see if it was something that he got off a shelf at a tattoo store or if it had more meaning to him. And he goes, "Oh, this is Sir Remington Silversteed from the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. Are you familiar with it?" And I said, "Yeah, I am actually. I take part in the Sydney ride." Anyway, I asked him if we could take a photo. His partner was taking a photo, and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you Mark?" I'm like, "Yeah." What? And then it just went. And then every time I was in ECMA, which is a big motorcycle sort of event in Italy, he was there and he would come up to me. He's like, "Do you remember me?" And I'm like, "How can I forget you?" Like, that was such an amazing interaction. And then I was in Santorini probably about 6 years ago, and a guy walks past me with a Distinguished Gentleman's tattoo on his left arm, a guy called, I think it was Giorgio. And anyways, that turned into a conversation, a photo, and a lot of drinks that night at dinner.
Now, you've worked, let's look on some of the tactics.
Yep.
You have very heavily utilized community social presence to help you grow the brand. Now, as an entrepreneur, when you've got a product or service, you want to identify it as a brand, as a trigger, as an experience, as a culture. And rather than just spending, millions of dollars on advertising, promotion, brand, all this kind of stuff. You got other people to promote what they were doing. And there's never a better endorsement than someone going, I do this because it's awesome. When did you first realize the power of social marketing and social networking and using all of these social platforms? And then how did you get the people involved to actually do the marketing for you?
Well, I mean, that was really organic. But if we look back at sort of my history, I've always been initially before motorcycles, primarily a car guy. And when we talk about cars, we talk about rotary vehicles, Mazda rotaries. And even back then, we're talking sort of 20 years ago, I used to organize meets through forums. One was called Oz Rotary. And it was, for me, it was always about bringing people together. And that's where I really enjoy myself. There's no doubt that I'm an extrovert. There's no doubt that I enjoy being the center of attention. There's no doubt that I enjoy meeting new people. And so for me back then, it was bringing people together, which really made me feel really good about being able to form these social connections just in Sydney. But when I started riding motorcycles, I woke up one morning and said, I want to get a motorcycle license. And I didn't have any family or friends that had motorcycles. For me, it was just this thing that happened. Got my motorcycle license, went to Japan for 4 weeks, and I fell in love with the Yamaha SR400s. They were a standard bike, but they were highly customized in Japan, and they were customized in a way where it was the expression of the individual. They were all different. So I thought, this is cool. I went back to Sydney and I bought a SR500 because I'm a bigger boy and I needed that extra 100 cc's of pure single cylinder power. And I started riding this motorcycle and I've gone, wow, this is cool. 4 weeks into it, I'm like, wow, this is very lonely. I didn't have any mates that rode motorbikes. And so I started up a group called Sydney Cafe Racers. Cafe Racer was the style of the motorcycle, of which I had learnt. And the priority was, how do I meet like-minded enthusiasts? So I went into different motorcycle shops. I set up some point of sale. And it basically had little business cards that we put there. And I said to the shops, hey, if you could please give this to any of the guys that come in here that have classic bikes, Cafe Racer Scramblers, that would be appreciated. And I formed relationships with those different workshops and those different businesses in Sydney. And then we had other cards that basically said, I only found one the other day. It said, your bike is fucking rad. Join us for a ride. And if you came across someone, you'd give them the card. And it was all about setting up Sydney Cafe Racers as a local community where people can connect and network. From there, it grew really rapidly, right? It was pretty much the flavor of the season. You had Deus, you had all these cool Iron and Resin, Iron and Air, all these different sort of magazines and all the rest of it. And there was a huge buzz around it. And what we were able to do is take people's passion for what is a niche within a niche and focus on it. And then we ended up starting Perth Cafe Racers, Newcastle, Melbourne, Canberra, and there were multiple different organizations around Australia. And it was using the same strategy. And there's no money to be made. It was just bringing people together. And then I think about a year or two into it, I basically gave it to the administration and they said, oh, what do you mean you're giving it to us? I'm like, well, this isn't about anything more than building a community. But what we're able to then take from building that community is that people wanted to connect with other enthusiasts that were passionate about the same style of motorcycle. And so when the idea came for DGR, it was very organic that we stuck to focusing on that style of motorcycle because that was a style of motorcycle that was niche, like I said earlier, a niche within a niche, but people were really passionate about. And the event started growing, pretty rapidly. Like Sydney's got 800-900 riders, and that's limited, like LA's limited by police, council, and all the rest of it. But the idea of bringing that aspect of sartorial clothing, that dapper fashion, into the actual ride is what helped us turn this into something that was stronger globally. Because who doesn't want to put a picture up of themselves in a suit on a cool motorcycle on their Instagram feed or on their Facebook? And I know that there's a lot of negatives about social media, but there are just as many positives. And what we were able to achieve is utilizing primarily Instagram and Facebook to be able to develop a community globally that are passionate about the event. You spoke about sort of, a lot of businesses, a lot of events spending a substantial amount of money on marketing. I don't think we even touched Facebook marketing as a financial aspect, we did not put any money into it until COVID, just to try and motivate people to take part during COVID. And we changed the strategy to being a solo ride, where it was ride together, ride alone together. I can't remember what it, ride solo together. And that generated a huge outcome for us. But literally the first time we spent money on Facebook advertising was 4 years ago. Everything else has been organic up until that point. And I personally feel that even if we stopped spending any money on social media, that the event would be, within 97% as strong as it is without it.
So you've built a community, you've built a following, you've built a cult, without a doubt. You've built a culture. And today, everyone wants, some people go, oh, culture is a bad thing. Nike, Apple, these are all cultures. People get behind them because they want to be part of that culture. And you've built that. What's next?
It's difficult for us because I always think about that, right? It's as someone that creates, there's personal goals of what do I do next? Is it a different industry? But then there's also within DGR. And what I love about DGR is that it does socially connect people. So irrespective of the financial outcomes for Movember and sort of prostate cancer research, there are a lot of lonely guys out there that sort of got to a point in their lives where they've had families, they've gotten rid of the motorcycle, the kids have grown up, they've lost their friendships because they've prioritized work and family balance, and focusing on that. And they get to this point where they're in their 40s, their 50s, and their 60s, and they get back into riding and they don't have that network. And I think that's probably one of the biggest outcomes for what we do. A lot of people get caught up in the fundraising element of the Distinguished Gentleman's Right, but we've got to be mindful that there's a lot of cultures out there where it's not normal to fundraise. Like in America, in Australia, in Canada, in the UK, we're born reading a book for charity, doing a readathon or going for a walk or something, but that's not a culture everywhere. So we always like to reiterate that the awareness that this brings about getting tested for prostate cancer is just as important as the fundraising, but it's also just as important as these guys and girls being able to connect with new people and being able to form meaningful relationships. I sit there and think, how do we take that to the next level? And we've done that by going into the car part of the world and focusing on classic cars. But do we look at creating something that allows these people to connect 365 days a year? The issue that we have there is how do you manage a community at I guess, a smaller level, but on a grander scale, 365 days a year, when you've got 107,000 different personalities, and you ultimately know that there's going to be politics involved and there's going to have to be some sort of organization structure. So I think our goal is, for the next few years at least, is how do we motivate them to continue coming back to the event, which naturally occurs pretty well. But how do we also get these guys forming those more meaningful relationships, or building out a part of our website where if any of those people are actually going through a darker period in their life, that they can get in contact with us. We can put them in contact with their ride host. They can go for a ride. The ride host can have some sort of training on mental health. And there's a lot of projects that we're working on, which are, we don't know how long it's going to take to get there. We know we'll eventually get there because, to us, there's no dead ends. There's just hurdles, and it's just about how fucking high you can jump. But the goal is, how do we support men even more than we currently do?
Wow. There must have been a point in time where that would have, and shallow plug for my book, there must have been a time when that would have been a go for stupid moment, a ridiculous dream that, oh my God, how could we do? But having conquered every city on two wheels, now this is just the next step. Do you ever look at your reach and go, wow?
Yeah, I do. And I'm comfortable enough admitting that as well. I think it was probably 2016 or 17. There was a friend of mine that was working in sort of a marketing agency, and the reports that they run for all of their different sort of businesses that they look after, she ended up doing one for DGR, and it had the collective reach of like 2 billion people when you plugged in all the different media, because one, again, it's still a sexy event for a good cause. So it
Mm.
gets a lot of publicity. Like, we had Jaime Camille, which is a Mexican actor that lives in LA. He did, I think, maybe 7 or 8 different news channels just in LA, riding his Thruxton motorcycle into the actual studio. And so it brings together a lot of awareness globally naturally on its own, but you still sit there and pinch yourself and you go, wow, we've created something bigger than us, more meaningful than any of our individual roles within it. But collectively, it's literally changing the world for some of these men and their families. And sometimes people get caught up on the name, the Distinguished Gentleman's Right. Is it sexist? Is it not sexist? But at the end of the day, it's based around men's health. And there is not one female that I personally know that doesn't have a man in their life, whether or not it's their dad, their brother, their son, or their partner. And so the outcomes that we achieve for men globally aren't only for men globally, they're for the family around them as well. And then when you amplify that, you've got 107,000 riders, and you've got 107,000 riders that have got mates, friends, and family. Already the numbers are in the million. It's incredible what we've achieved in what I feel is a short period of time.
Well, you have, and I'm proud that you keep going. But I want to pick on a topic which aggravates the shit out of me a lot. That's my own personal preference. But do you get attacked because of identifying it as a distinguished gentleman's ride? Do you get any hate on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it attack or hate. I think it's how do I professionally word it? Oh fuck it, I don't really do professional anyway. Basically, we'll have people that sit there and females that will sit there and write something on social media. But we don't even need to respond. It's at a point now where there are so many females that take part in our ride.
Yeah.
10% of our ride hosts are female. We're talking about 90 ride hosts are female, and half of our ambassadors every single year are female. So the comment will come through. We won't delete it. We'll just leave it up there. But there will always be anywhere between 1 to 10 females that will jump on and say, well, wait a second, skip the name part. We take part in the event. We do this for our dads. We do this for our partners. We do this for our kids. And the ambassadors that take part in the event are super sort of comfortable with that as well. So in a perfect 2023 world or 2024 world, whenever this goes live, would the name have been something different? Possibly. Are we willing to sort of go down the path of changing all the branding and spending a hell of a lot of money on trademarks on an international scale? Probably not.
Which brings us into a great question. We are constantly changing, and a lot of people are looking. They almost seem fearful. They're looking for the next change, the next shift, whether it be pronouns, whether it be Gen Z, whether it be recession. Everyone's almost looking for the next problem. If you were to launch the DGR today, regardless of what name it was, let's just call it the DR, the Distinguished Ride, okay?
Yeah.
If you were to launch the DR today, what would be your single focus on getting it off the ground and getting it into the worldwide phenom that it is today?
The single focus, I mean, it would have to be built around community. Again, the focus, it's always community. Everything that we do comes down to community. If you look at my other events that I run, like Throttle Roll, which is a street party with custom motorcycles and rock bands and all the rest of it, community is the core of every single thing that we do. And it has to be the core because that's what gives it, I guess, its power on a global scale. And like you said, you've got Nike and all these different brands that sort of, the goal is for a lot of them to build community. The difference with us is it's community based around supporting men. It's not community based around profits. When I first started DGR, the idea was let's build this up and let's actually just give this to a charity because this isn't going to be my full-time job. I want to make money. And it got to the point where in the third year, we had a guy contact us and he was actually from Kent in the UK. He's probably like your brother or something. And he turned around and he said, hey, if it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. And he shared his story and his wife called and said thank you. And his kids called and said thank you. And you start to sit there and I go, how fucking selfish am I that I'm going to give this to someone else to run that most likely don't know motorcycles, most likely don't see the world the same way that I see the world, or for me to go and make a profit. And then I think it was probably the fifth year that I actually started to make an income from it. And I'll openly admit that I make an income from it and that there's
Oh, yeah.
another 5 to 6 people that do. Because without us doing this, there is no growth. There is no 45 million US dollars raised in the last 11 years of fundraising. And so it's important that people understand that although this is for a good cause, there's still money involved because there's still 900 events that have costs. There's still trademarks that need to be paid. There's still staff that need to be paid. There's first aid kits. There's insurance, which is our single biggest cost. But the cool thing about it is that it started off at a really authentic, I can't even speak English anymore, authentic way. And it was organic. So people see that, they connect with that, they know that. You're always going to have some haters that will sit there and go, oh, wait a second, he just does it for a paycheck. I don't care what they think. They don't know how I operate. The guys that work with me know how I operate. The people around me know how I operate. And that's all that matters to me. If you want to take part in the event, take part. If you don't, you don't. If you want to donate directly, donate directly. The thing for us is very early on, especially with social media and the negative parts of social media, we realized we can't be something for everyone. And I truly believe that the person that tries to be something for everyone will always fail. We are all wired to individually. There are 7 billion of us on this earth. We're not all going to agree to the same things. We're not going to all like the same things. And we're going to have dislikes and we're not going to connect with certain personalities. You can't be something for everyone. And I think the moment that sort of I realized that was the moment that I felt like, you know what, I actually am unstoppable and I'm going to keep on pushing, because there was a lot of insecurity in those initial years. You sit there creating this event that, again, is bigger than you, feels bigger than you. You've got all these different hurdles that you need to jump that you haven't had to jump before because no one has had to jump them before. Who the fuck else in the world is creating an event that's in 900 cities on the same day? It's fucking ridiculous, right? And yet here we are doing it successfully for the last 12 years. And so you get to a point where all that insecurity turns into, I guess, pride, probably a little bit of ego. But you start to realize that the people that you looked up to that you thought had the answers, they actually didn't. And what you believed in from day one was right. And you back yourself, you stay in that path, and it gets us to where we are today. Even in the early days, I thought this is a 10-year project. We might get to 10 years and people are going to be bored of it. They're going to be sick of it. They're not going to even want to ride motorcycles anymore. And yet 12 years later, we've grown 20% on last year.
One of the things I like doing is looking up your Instagram profile.
Yeah.
The day I wake up to do the DGR. Now, the DGRs kick off around about 10 o'clock. Between 9:30, 10 o'clock here in LA. And I'm able to wake up, pour my coffee, look at the Instagram and see like the Melbourne and the Sydney and the London and the Japan, and seeing all those peeps going out and completing their rides before I've even got the motor warmed. It's a beautiful feeling of connectivity in a world when we've never been more disconnected. And you were saying that you are not there to kind of like pacify or please anyone. More than anything, you're there to go, this is me. If you want to join me, fine. If not, don't be part of the conversation. And I think today we're missing out on that. And I applaud you for doing that and taking that stance.
Well, I think it's an important one because, like I said, we're all individuals. We're all wired individually. What I love about DGR is a lot of people want to sit there and say that I'm DGR. I'm not DGR. DGR is 107,000 riders. That's what DGR is. My views are not DGR's views. DGR's views tend to be my views because I'm happy to sort of help raise money for prostate cancer and all the rest of it. But it's bigger than me. And I think what I love about DGR is the consistency that we get on a global scale. That friendship, that camaraderie, that social connectivity, it feels the same as it does in Sydney as it does in LA. I've done, I think, 7 different rides globally. This year, I actually did 2 in one day. So to your point, I started off in Auckland, New Zealand, which is the start of the international timeline, I guess, dateline. And then I flew to Hawaii because that's the end. So I was playing on time zones. So I got to do 2. And the passion that you feel at a 300-person ride and at a 20-person ride is the same. The reason people are there is shared, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You connect with these people irrespective of culture, religion, language barriers, skin colors, genders, sexual preferences. All of that shit is irrelevant, and that's what I love about DGR, but that's also what I love about motorcycling. What I love about motorcycling is you can look at certain sports like swimming, running, and go, okay, a guy is built physically different to a female. They're going to excel at that more. When it comes to riding motorcycles on the road, it's all this. You sit there and go, I want to go left, and fuck, you're going left. You sit there and go, I want to go right, and you're going right. The rest of it is it's not important. And so for us, we sit there and go, we've actually got an event that is open to everyone that rides these styles of motorcycles. And then obviously we're always going to get hate from people that want to ride on a different bike. And worst case scenario, they can join at the back of the pack. It's not an issue. But again, we need to continue to keep this something that's not for everyone. If you're really passionate about what we do, but there's no room on the ride, you can still donate to Movember. You can still go and get checked for prostate cancer, and you can still sit there and share that awareness with your friends. I think a lot of people get caught up on certain different aspects of DGR, but the fact of the matter is, if it was something that was for absolutely everyone, it would fail. And it would fail for multiple reasons. It would fail because people want to be a part of something that's a little bit more exclusive sometimes. That's the nature of how we're wired, right? But also, if that LA ride was to grow to being open to everyone, you could get 10,000 different riders. And what you're going to do is you're going to shut down the streets, you're going to piss off all the locals, you're going to upset police, and you're going to piss off the council as well. You probably won't get insurance because of that scale. There's obviously additional risks. And then you've obviously got, how do you litigate that risk, especially in the US where it is quite a litigious place, right?
Yep.
So, where our goal isn't to grow to 500,000 riders. Our goal is to continue existing, continue creating that awareness, teach more people outside of our world, and do what we do for years to come. And ultimately, everything that goes up goes down, and everything that starts ends. And when it gets to that point, I think we'll all sit there pretty proud of ourselves going, the one call a week that we get, the one email a week that we get of people that have stated, if it wasn't for you, we'd be dead. That's enough for us to sit there and go, you know what? Okay, it's done. We've achieved this, and we're proud.
Yeah, it is good. I had a friend of mine once say to me, if you build something for everyone, you build it for no one. So yeah. I'm very proud of you've done that. Again, shout out. What is the Instagram, or what is the website where people can follow you?
Gentleman's Ride, obviously for the ride. It's the same Instagram and Facebook as well, Twitter and LinkedIn and all the rest of it. And then if you've got four wheels and it's a classic four wheels, so pre-80s, Gentleman's Drive as well. And Gentleman's Drive, we started a few years ago, and I think this year we had about 150 different drives around the world. And that's pretty cool as well, actually, because it still suits. It's a different format, because the last thing you want to do is take old cars through the heart of a city and cause congestion. I mean, one car is essentially four motorcycles in regards to space, right? But that's an actual drive that goes through, like Angela's Crest, or down through the one highway. It's more of a scenic route. And let's be clear, I don't think classic car owners need to break a stereotype that they're a 1%er in a motorcycle gang. So it's a different format. But again, it still raises a lot of awareness for what we do. People love that event because it is like the Goodwood Revival, which you mentioned earlier. They're like, we get dressed up. We don't have to travel all the way to the UK. We can do our own mini Goodwood where there's an actual drive cruise involved. It's like a cars and coffee on steroids. And the LA drive is actually hosted by a really good friend of ours, and she's a female hosting the Distinguished Gentleman's Drive. So they're two really good links to check out. And I mean, by all means, I think Movember is our charity partner. They've been our charity partner for 7 or 8 years now, and what they've been able to achieve by us being able to connect those events with a global entity like Movember helps us achieve things that we wouldn't be able to do on our own. And the awareness that we've been able to achieve in those different markets is a huge one. And so another message I want to share, if I can, is, if you're over 45, get checked for prostate cancer. If you've got a family history, it's over 40. And yes, those stats change depending on where you live and depending on what, local health advisors. But to go and get a blood test once a year or even once every 2 years, it's a pretty easy thing to do. And I mean, if you get to it early enough, you still get to use your penis without needing any additional support. You still get to use all your bodily functions perfectly. So, I mean, if you're willing to risk that, by all means. But as a man, I think, two things that are pretty important to us, unfortunately, to some, it's worth getting checked.
No, that's it. I'm going to put all the links that you've mentioned to follow you. I'm also, out of respect for the people that support this, including Triumph, I'm going to put your sponsors in there, Movember. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes of this so you can follow Mark, follow DGR, and follow the sponsors. Let's be serious. They help support and they benefit from all these people coming together. But Mark, I really appreciate what you do. As I say, I go to it. I endorse it. I'll be at the next one with my wife. I think if I didn't go, she'd get on the bike and go herself. So thank you very much. I look forward to crossing two wheels with you again soon. Thanks for being on the show, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me. See ya.
Bye. Well, that was another episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. If you like it, you know the scoop. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it around. Let them get benefit from this juice. And of course, if you want to change the room you're in, join Sims Distillery. Jump over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, or you can find a link directly from that website. That's the room where creative disruptors get together to actually help each other become better. If you've got standards or you want higher standards, join the right room. See you next time.